Well, Joshua, I wanted to take this time and welcome you to Aaron's Opinion, formally, of course. And of course, I'll say so in the intro. But thank you to our great friend from Tunisia. You guys know him by now, of course. Radwan Mednini suggested this guest, ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Constantinoff. So, my first question, and you will not be surprised when I ask it, is who is Joshua Constantinoff? Take as much time as you need. Go ahead.
Hmm. That's a hard question. um, I'm a legally blind, epileptic single father, um, and a recovering drug addict. I'm clean and sober now, but
Congratulations.
those are my struggles that I've been through,
Okay.
and we'll go through all of that as we go through my story. But that's kind of the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, yeah, I don't know where to start.
All right. All right. Well, here,
uh,
let me help you. Okay. So
sure.
let's start off by something that you said a couple days ago, and I forget when it was, but when I spoke to you over Messenger, you were saying how your story, how you became blind, is a little unusual. Can you tell us how you became blind and walk us through that day?
Yeah. Um, so I was not, it was about 4 years ago, um, about this time of year, a few months before this time of year, it was in the summer. Um, and it's just getting dark, like the sun had just set. I walked down to the store to get a drink and a couple things. And I was walking home, and somebody shined a laser in my eyes, and it burned my retinas, and it scarred the retina, which left me with very little central vision in both eyes because they hit one eye, and then when I looked up, they got my other eye. So I have very little central vision in either eye, if any, really. I was actually just went to the eye doctor a couple weeks ago, and my central vision's even got worse since the last time I was in, but that's not really relevant. um, so yeah, I've never known anybody who lost their sight the way I did. It's pretty unique, but those laser pointers are they're dangerous. They're not toys, especially the cheap ones that some people are buying, from Mexico and China. And if they're not made properly, they can be extremely dangerous. Um, so
Okay. Now, this is sort of a strange question here, but why and it is irrelevant, but I'm just curious, like, why did the person shine the laser in your eye? Was it, I mean, lasers can travel for miles. Was it even done intentionally, or was there some specific reason, or did you know who it was? I mean, it's, I mean,
I,
I
I
believe
don't know.
I believe you. Obviously, I believe you, Joshua. But it is, I have to admit, between you and I, it is unusual. Like, who was it, and did they know that they were doing that?
I don't know who it was. Um, we did call the cops, but obviously not seeing who did it, they really didn't do much. They didn't even try to do anything, to be honest, which was pretty frustrating. Um, but I don't know who did it. It could have been just some kid playing around, like, hey, look at this, I can shine it in his eyes. Or it could have been somebody who was irritated with me for things that I did in my past. I haven't always been the nicest guy. Um, Back when I was using drugs and doing some of those things, not only was I using drugs, but I used to collect money for drug dealers and loan sharks. So I pissed off a lot of people back then. It could have been somebody just trying to get back at me for something I did then. Who knows?
Right, right. Yeah, who
So
knows? Well, at any rate, you got past that, and then, so after you, so today are you, totally blind, or do you have usable vision? And just to tell you a little bit more about me, I was born blind with glaucoma, and I also have a congenital heart defect. So that's my background. Now, nowadays, are you totally blind, or do you have usable vision? What do you think?
I do have some usable vision. My peripheral vision is pretty good. Um, but like I said, my central vision is almost non-existent. And on top of that, I have extreme light sensitivity. Um, so even having the peripheral vision doesn't do me a whole lot of good when it's bright out. Um, I actually, um, after having the laser shine in my eyes for about 3.5 years, I had a migraine every day. There was nothing I could do about it. I locked myself in my room for about 3.5 years with blackout curtains. Had my not literally locked myself, but you know what I mean. I
Sure,
didn't.
indeed, indeed.
Uh, I had blackout curtains. I didn't turn my light on, and I still wore my sunglasses even in there with no light because that's how much the light hurt my head and my eyes. Um, and then last December, after having lost my eyesight and slowly coming to terms with that, I wasn't really learning how to do anything yet because I was really just staying in my room for the most part because of how much the light bothered me.
Right.
Um, but last December, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. I started having seizures. So that was a new struggle to deal with, uh, which was probably partly caused from the laser and the fact that I had a migraine for over 3 years. Um, but it was also probably caused by some of the other things that I did throughout my life. I used to do boxing. I was hit by a couple of cars when I was younger. Uh,
Goodness.
I've had a lot of different injuries
Yeah. Yeah.
and whatnot.
I have to ask in this very interesting conversation that we're already having. Did you happen to listen to Experience, Faith, and Hope, where I spoke with Daniel Malone? Did you happen to listen to that one?
I can't remember right
That's
off.
fine. That's fine. He also had several experience very similar to yours, so that's why I brought it up. Anyway, that's very, very fascinating. And now I'm going to ask a very serious question, and you do not need to tell me. I will preface
Oh,
this
I'm
by
an
saying,
open book.
oh, okay, fine. So if you do, so I'm the reason I'm asking is the reason I would like to ask this question and talk about this with you is because scrolling all over the various blindness groups on Facebook, I see that there are many people who struggle, have struggled, and sadly may very well will struggle with substance abuse, and it's a very serious matter. I've spoken to several people in the blindness community whose story is eerily similar to yours, almost the same story. So, if you don't mind me asking, how'd you get into drugs? Philosophically, years ago, and then
So,
how did you get out of it? Because a lot of other blind people might be where you were and need that knowledge.
right, that's actually the first struggle that I had. That's where my story actually starts. That's probably where we should have started,
We'll start it there.
but
No
that's
problem.
okay.
No worries. Go
Um,
right ahead.
so when I was about 15, I didn't start drugs when I was 15, but we're going to start there. When I was about 15, me and my siblings were put into foster care.
Ugh.
Um, my mom, well, hold on. My mom had some issues she had to go take care of for herself. So me and my younger siblings were put into foster care. And I was introduced to drugs while in foster care. I actually aged out of the foster care system. I was in foster care until I was almost 19 years old. Um, and um, part of the issue with drugs that I had was when I was younger, I was diagnosed as ADD. Um, I don't think I ever actually had ADD. I think a lot of people are misdiagnosed with that, especially young boys that are really hyper and excited. Their parents don't know how to deal with it, and the doctors say, "Oh, he has ADD. Give him this medication; it'll calm him down." And I think that's a horrible idea, but that's what they did with me. Instead of teaching me how to focus, they gave me a medication. Uh, and then when I went into foster care, one of my foster brothers was a meth addict, and they introduced me to meth, and it did the same thing that medication I took when I was a kid did. It helped me focus. I was doing high school full time. I was doing night school, had a full time job. I was extremely stressed. And it helped me. It helped me focus on the things I needed to do. At that time, and I know this sounds kind of bad to say it this way, but I don't know how else to say it, but I didn't really have a problem at that time. I was using it like a medication. I wasn't staying up, for extended periods of time. I'd get up and I'd smoke a little bit. I'd go do the things that I needed to do, and I'd go to sleep at night. And when I decided, when I wasn't doing night school anymore and all of that, I quit using it, and I didn't have a problem quitting using it. But later on in my life, when things, after I had gotten married and my wife left and everything kind of just went to shit, I remembered how that drug made me feel. So I started using it. And that's when I really had a problem. I couldn't quit. Well, I shouldn't say I couldn't quit. It was really hard to quit because I did quit. And I quit by myself. I didn't go to any programs or anything. But it was really hard. It was really hard. But that first time that I was using, like I said, I wasn't using to get away from my problems or anything. I was using it because like those medications I was on when I was a kid, it helped me focus. It helped me get the things done that I needed to get done. Uh, but when I was older, I was trying to get away from my problems, and that's when you really develop an addiction. Is when you're trying to, regardless of whether it's methamphetamines or opiates or alcohol or whatever it is that you're using. That's when you become an addict. Is when you're trying to get away from your problems. It doesn't matter what you're using. If you're using it to get away from your problems, you're going to develop an addiction. And when I did that, it took me a few years. Well, I used for a few years, and it took me probably, after I decided I need to quit, it took me probably a year to actually kick it and get cleaned. And then even after I got stopped using, I kept, having urges and wanting to start again. And I was surrounded by people that I knew that used and people that I had used with. I live in a relatively small town or small city, whatever you want to call it. I don't live in a very big place. And I knew a lot of people, especially like I told you, I collected for a lot of the drug dealers around here when people didn't pay their dues and whatnot. So I knew pretty much everybody in town. So when I kept having those urges, I left town for a year. I moved all the way across country. I moved out to Massachusetts just to make sure that I got my head right and make sure that I wasn't going to relapse. Because like I said, I have a son, and I don't need to be raising him in that environment or leading him down that road. So it took a while for me to pull my head out of my ass, but I got there eventually.
Okay. Well, great. As you said, look, I'm glad you pulled your head out of your ass. I'm really proud of you for doing that. And I think it really, you must be a really strong person and a really great father to be able to just come to some stranger's podcast and just tell that story so beautifully. So I think that's a really, really, really important thing that you said, where you said that, the addiction, in your opinion, doesn't really start when you start using drugs. The addiction starts when you use drugs to get away from the problem. And that's a very interesting thing that I think is misunderstood. Quite frankly, I haven't thought of it because luckily I don't want to say I was blessed, but I mean, this sounds really horrible, but it sounds really, really mean, but luckily I've never used drugs. So luckily I don't need to worry about that. But I think a lot of people around the community struggle with these types of issues, whether it's, prescription, over the counters, or the hard drugs that you were in, but as I said, the most important thing is that you pulled your head out of your ass and now you told the truth about it. And that's very, very liberating to a lot of blind people around the community. So then what happened? Okay, so thank you. And then what? Let's keep the momentum going here. So then what after, as you said, after you pulled your head out of your ass and started to get things together, then what happened?
Well, then I went back, I went and got a job, and I was clean for, I don't know, about four, probably 3 or 4 years, and then I lost my eyesight.
And you're saying you were clean for 3 or 4 years and then you lost your eyesight with the laser incident near the gas station, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what?
Uh, and then I struggled through that, obviously, and that was probably one of the most depressing things I've ever been through because just having somebody do that to you and not knowing why, or I mean, uh, anybody listening to this who's lost their eyesight is going to understand. That's just you struggle with it. It's something that you get pissed off about. You want to know why, and even if it wasn't something that somebody did to you, like it was in my case, you get pissed off, um, and you struggle with it. You want to know why that was taken from you. Um, but in my situation, it was literally somebody did something to me. Whether it was just somebody playing around, or like I said before, it could have been somebody who was pissed off at me. Who knows? Um, so I struggled with that for a little while, or a long while. It was a couple of years. um, and then as soon as I was starting to come out of that funk, I got hit with the epilepsy. Um, and well, that one wasn't as depressing because I had already worked through, losing my eyesight and everything. And when I got out of the anger of losing my eyesight, I decided I'm not going to be mad anymore. I don't care what happens. I'm done being mad. So having epilepsy didn't piss me off like that anyway. I struggled with my emotions because my brain wasn't working. I couldn't control my emotions. Um, there for a little while until they got me on some medication. But I couldn't control anything. My brain was malfunctioning. um, so it's just been, a long broken road. But it's made me the person I am. So I guess I can't complain too much.
You really cannot. In a philosophical sense, you're absolutely right. You really cannot complain too much. Although it's worth being frustrated because what happened to you is very, very frustrating. You know, there's no doubt about it. That's very, very frustrating. So, um, I mean, how do you spend your time, on the day to day, the day to day basis?
I do a lot of cooking and baking. I've always really liked to cook and bake my entire life. That's actually what got me through losing my eyesight. That was the one thing that I never really gave up on was cooking and baking. Um, I'm starting to write again. Um, I do some woodworking, and I reach out to people and to try and help them, or I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but like I hate having epilepsy. It doesn't let me use the words I want sometimes. Um, I've found that helping other people is the best way to help myself. So um, I've found my way out of my depression by reaching out and helping other people, if that makes any sense.
It most definitely does. Do you know what the slogan here, our slogan at Aaron's Opinion is?
I can't remember it right now,
That's
but I'm
fine.
sure I've heard it many times.
That's fine. That's fine. Help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow, right? So you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
You've figured out that that's true. If you only help one other person, you helped 1 million, and that's true.
I'm actually I'm waiting to get my orientation and mobility training finished because they put that on hold for a little while when I got diagnosed with epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm going to be starting it again here I was supposed to be starting it on Friday, but my trainer got diagnosed, not diagnosed. She got exposed to COVID. So we had to put it off for a couple of weeks. Um, but as soon as I get that done, I'm probably going to be going back to school, and I plan on becoming a certified drug and alcohol counselor.
Well, I think that's outstanding for you. I think I think that's an appropriate. I think that's very given your experiences in life. I think you would be someone who would truly be able to help others. So that's really really good. So how does drug and alcohol counseling work?
Sorry, you cut out there.
How does drug and alcohol counseling work?
Um, Basically, like any other counselor, except for with an emphasis on somebody who's struggling with drugs and alcohol.
Okay. So then, how does, because maybe other blind people who listen would want to know, you know? In other words, how, what is counseling? Let's define that. Let's start there.
Um, See if my brain's going to let me do this correctly. I guess the way I would say it is it's just somebody who's going to be open and willing to let you talk through your problems with them
Okay,
in a non-judgmental way.
and there you go. Okay, so maybe drug and alcohol counseling might be the practice of listening to people's problems in a non-judgmental way to help them um, basically overcome their addiction.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think that's great. So, and what do you need to do? What steps do you need to take to be a counselor in your state?
I would have to get my bachelor's degree,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'd have to do some different, um, what's it called? I'm going to say on the job training, but that's not what it's called. Like I'd have to do some shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what it's called either, but you probably know what I'm talking about when I say that.
Probably maybe on the job training or shadowing. Right.
Yeah, like I'd have to go with, wow, epilepsy. Come on, brain, work. um, I'd have to have so many hours of um, shadowing in each different um, category, or well, I guess that's the best word I'm going to come up with. Each different like classification of the type of work that I'm wanting to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So probably there's some sort of a course, and you need to complete some amount of training hours in each of the maybe categories. Maybe let's say right.
Yeah, like I'd have to have so many hours of case management work and so many hours of counseling and so many hours of um, peer support work and so many hours of each of the different um, yeah, I can't remember the word I'm looking for.
That's fine. No worries, Joshua. Probably no worries. No worries. Yeah, they have a curriculum for the things that you need to complete training hours in to be certified in this area. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what if any research, and I'm asking because I want to learn from you, as of course a teacher myself. I appreciate any opportunity to learn, to have more knowledge. So if, and as I say, if you don't mind me asking, what percentage of blind people in the United States are suffering today from drug or alcohol abuse?
That I don't know, but I would imagine that it's probably relatively high. I mean, the general population is relatively high,
Well,
and
that's
then
true indeed.
you
Sadly,
add
indeed, that's true. Yes.
you add any disability into that, and it's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to turn to drugs.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. We have a very, very serious drug problem in this country right now. So, yeah, it's not good. Anyway, yes,
Especially
go ahead.
because any disability, especially one as severe as being blind or something like that, uh, your support group tends to turn their back on you,
Yeah, yeah. And,
which
and I'm
leads
going to,
you to bad choices.
right. And speaking of support groups, I'm going to make a constructive, and this is a little critical, but let me ask you a question specifically about the various support groups that we're on Facebook for blind and visually impaired people. I'm going to take a wild guess. I think we're in the same group. We might be. What do you think of the support groups on Facebook for blind people?
There's a couple of them that I'm in that are great, and there's a few of them that I'm in that I don't really think that they should be called support groups.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
there's some of them that are they're great, and
right.
some of them that are not so great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have found that the various support groups, in my opinion, are not supportive. And I have a problem with that. And I have a problem not because, how do I put this? The problem for me is not the fact that the groups are not supportive. The fact is that people in those groups are in some ways on purpose or accidentally, but either way, some people in these groups are intentionally being unsupportive. But
Yeah,
and I'm wondering if that's only my opinion, my imagination, or are you seeing the same thing?
I see the same thing
Okay, there you
in
go.
some of the groups for
Right, in some
sure.
of them, I would stretch that to say, in in some of them is a bit of a conservative measure. I would say that in most of the groups, in many of the groups, there's at least one person that's unsupportive. And there are things throughout Facebook and throughout the community that on social media, podcasts, journalism, politics, there's a lot of things that I disagree with. In fact, I know you don't know me, but I will tell you point blank that there are more things that I disagree with than agree with. But most of the time, I don't say anything. Most of the time, I'm able to just go about my business. If you don't like something, don't worry about it so much, But I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know. That's just my little rant about how to behave in a support group. Either be supportive or don't say anything. But
Yeah,
to be intentionally unsupportive. Now, what I mean is sometimes people say the wrong thing accidentally and they don't realize. And those people, it's very obvious that it's unintentional. But when you're intentionally being unsupportive, it's very noticeable. So don't be that person. So, such a problem with that these days.
right. So I
Yeah.
guess I would agree with you. There are some people in all of the groups that are intentionally unsupportive. But some of the groups are really good about doing or trying their best to do something about it.
Really?
Some of the groups just don't care.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I found that the groups that I'm in, in my opinion, the admins are quite frankly either unable or unwilling to truly, administrate the groups. But it is hard. But yeah, it's very, very frustrating. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had in one of the groups I'm in, we had somebody ask a question about um, going shooting and hunting,
Uh-huh.
and it kicked up a shitstorm.
Really?
Oh yeah, somebody because this particular group was a worldwide group, um, and somebody from over in the UK somewhere
Mm-hmm.
got on there, and they did not like the fact that some American was asking about how they could still go shooting,
Yeah, yeah.
and
What it is
they made it very clear.
there are people in other countries who have decided in their mind, and it's not true, but there are people who've decided in their mind that 100% of the American population has a gun. So the fact that
Yeah,
someone was saying that just spun them up even more. So, which isn't true. Actually, most Americans don't have a gun, but but either way, that's not so. So how was this particular matter resolved?
um, unfortunately,
Uh oh.
um, well, unfortunately, but fortunately in some ways. Well, yeah, hold on, I'll get to it. So the guy that got upset got on there and said, "Is this a support group?" And obviously, I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to remember exactly everything that was said, but he got on there and said, "Is this actually a support group for blind and visually impaired people, or is this just another way for Americans to further their Second Amendment agenda?"
That's okay.
Like he was
That's yeah. No, no, that would have set me off
he
too.
was just trying to cause shit. He was just trying to stir up shit.
No, that's combative. Yeah, that's definitely
And everybody obviously that pissed off some Americans. And
right.
it went back and forth a little bit. So the admins eventually just shut the comments on that post down.
Oh my.
But
See, and
then
that just
we
makes
weren't
it
able to have
worse.
the conversation that
Yeah.
we needed to have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but before the comments got shut off, I had gotten on there and made a post as politely as I could, um, because I was rather pissed off too. I didn't cuss or anything, but I said, "Well, I don't think I cussed. I may have
Well,
said ass
you
or
can
something
cut.
like that."
Well, that's fine.
But
This is explicit. This podcast, by the way, is marked as explicit in the YouTube. And to watch me on YouTube, you have to be 18. So you can speak your mind on my show. So if you
well, I'm
cussed or
just
not, what
saying,
did you
like,
say?
I don't think I cussed. I was trying to be very polite when I
Okay.
responded
So
to
what?
as,
Okay.
as polite as I could.
Okay.
But I
Hell with
got on
being
there.
polite. Hell with being polite. What did you try to say to try to resolve this mess?
I got on there and I told them, hold on, let me think for a second. I gotta get this right. I said, obviously, I'm gonna have to paraphrase again, but I said something along the lines of, you know, your your ancestors didn't have a problem with Americans owning guns when we came over there during World War I and saved their asses. Or wait, maybe they did. Maybe we're fighting against them, and that's why you have a problem with Americans owning guns. But either way, he didn't do anything wrong in asking this question. If you have a problem with the question, just
Yeah.
move on. Nobody asked for your comment.
Yeah, and I will say, to to show the whole story, or or to show both sides, or as someone in our great friend in the podcast community once said, I love saying this. Not that it's applicable, but it's just a cute thing to say on a podcast. To play devil's advocate without being the devil. I could tell you that there was a time in one of the support groups where someone did make someone wrote a post about like going on a shooting and like massacring people. So obviously, I saw that post and I reported it to the admin, and the admin took it down and called the person and resolved it. So the point is that there are times where posts need to be flagged and need to be addressed. But by no means
Oh, for sure.
but by no means are we saying that you can just say get on these groups and say whatever you want. Okay, for the most part you can, but you know what? Sometimes, occasionally, once a year, if someone does say something that does need to be pulled over and investigated. So, and that only, but by the way, that happens very, very, very infrequently. That, and I've only reported one post in one group one time, and I'm glad that I did because it was worth it. So yeah, so in the end it was resolved. Luckily, the person didn't kill anyone, so just thank God. But with certain things, with very few things, you need to speak up. Most of the time, you should have a conversation. So, this blind person, do you know if they ever went hunting?
Um, they did before they lost their sight,
Right.
and they were wanting to be able to continue to go hunting. They were asking advice about how they could do that. And we were having a constructive conversation about it. I'd like to be able to go shooting again, but that's something that I haven't figured out how to do. Um, so I wanted to continue that conversation too. So after it got shut down, they turned off the comments. I contacted one of the admins and I was like, "Hey, what's up with this?" They
Mm-hmm.
explained why they shut down the comments, and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna ask again." And they were like,
Right.
"Okay."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that is in fact a good way of dealing with these types of matters. So
So
yeah, go ahead.
I got on and I made a very polite post and I said, "Hey, somebody asked about this and the comments got out of hand, so they had to get shut off. So I'm going to politely ask everybody, if you don't want to be a productive part of this conversation." I told them, if you don't want to be a productive part of be part of this conversation, if you don't want to, but some of us would like to have this conversation. So yeah, and that time it went.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay. So, what are some other critical issues that are on your mind that you would like to address on this podcast now that you're here?
I don't know. I don't really have any critical issues on my mind.
Right, right. Well, we
All the critical issues that were on my mind. And listening to my story.
right. Sure, sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, how did you come across Aaron's opinion in the first place?
A friend of mine told me about it when you had him on here a little while back. Um, a friend told me that you reached out to him, and so I was like, "Well, that sounds interesting. I'll check it out."
Okay. Well,
Well,
very well. That's really really excellent. So, Joshua, I have asked you a number of questions, and I'm sure you have questions that you would like to ask me. So, what are some questions, and what are some areas that you want me to talk about, and what are some questions that you have? By the way.
I'm kind of curious. You said you're a teacher. Uh,
What is your question? Joshua, I think it's starting to lag too much now. I think we might have to wrap up the episode pretty soon here. But try to ask your question.
I was wondering. Can you hear me?
Yes, but there's a tremendous lag. So, what is your question?
What subject do you teach?
Yes, yes, yes. I teach English as a second language. Um, so the we have been speaking for a good while now. I would like to come to the end of this episode. It's nothing personal about you, Joshua. I don't want to give the listener a hard time because the lag is starting to get distracting. Even though it corrects itself a little in the recorder, it's a little distracting. So, do you have any final words of wisdom or final things that you would like to say before we, conclude the episode?
Just thanks for having me on, and I hope everybody has a great day or night whenever you're listening to this.
Okay, okay. Very good. It sounds like the signal seems to have corrected. And I agree with you that we should have a very good day and take care of ourselves and all of that. So, okay, so I teach English as a second language online. Do you want to get in some more questions? I want you to be able to ask all of your questions.
That was really it. I was wondering what you taught and like what level you taught it. Like,
Sure,
you
sure.
know,
So, I find that I teach students from all over the world and I teach all levels. But most of the time, it's someone who has pretty good English and things like that. So an intermediate speaker. But have you thought about getting into podcasting or YouTube yourself to share your journey in life?
um, I have thought about doing YouTube a little bit. And people keep telling me that I need to do a YouTube channel with my cooking and baking,
Mm-hmm.
but I, I don't have any equipment to do that right now. So it's something that I've thought about, and I need to get the equipment if I'm going to. But a lot of my flags, I'm really good at breaking them down and making them really simple.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Tell me that I need to do a YouTube channel.
Right.
I have the
Right.
equipment to do that right now.
Well, that is all fine. I hear that the signal is weakening again. I just wanted to thank you, and I'll thank you in the outro on the recording of the podcast itself. But thank you so much for joining me. I realize that we don't know each other, and that you really just were taking a kind of a leap of faith in talking to me, and I really appreciate it. So I'm sure that you'll have a lot of great comments about this episode, and I really enjoyed speaking to you and learning from you and being able to help you. So so thanks so much, and know that you are always welcome here at Aaron's Opinion. All right,
All right. Well, thank you. You have a good night.
my pleasure.